right, thank you everybody. Thank you Steve, Dave, and all of you for coming out and spending some time with us this morning. I love coming to this event. I've been doing it, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now, and my only request has been to please make it warmer in Syracuse when I come up to visit in January. And because nobody was able to do anything about that, we're having a cold snap in Philadelphia. It was literally the same temperature when I got off the plane up here, so no change. I guess that's as good as it's going to get. We don't know what's going to happen in 2025. This is a tough one. And as we sat and talked about the economic outlook and about the market outlook, we decided that it was a little bit like a game of Chutes and Ladders. I think everybody in this room remember this game. You play it. My kids don't play it. They just play with their cell phones. It's a very different world now. But if you remember Chutes and Ladders, it was both fun and also incredibly frustrating. You knew that you were going to move up the board, and then sometimes you would get that exhilarating boost of landing on a ladder and moving up more quickly. But then sometimes you would hit the chute. Incredibly frustrating. And as we looked at what could possibly be driving the U.S. economy and markets this year, we decided it was a little bit like this because of the incoming administration. Not because of a political bent or taking a side or anything like that, but obviously the current president plays a different game than most have in the past in terms of it's very hard to predict what's going to come out of it. Tariffs. Are we going to levy tariffs on all of the imports coming into our country? Or will we use tariffs as a leveraging tool to get a great new deal with Mexico and Canada, as we did several years ago? It's very hard to predict how those things are going to turn out, and I'm going to dig a little bit more into that after talking a little bit about where we stand now. So when we take a look back at markets, I think that this is important, and we do this for two reasons. This is market returns across a variety of asset classes in 2024. And we do this for two reasons. One is because it gives us a sense of where we are starting at the beginning of this year. And the second reason is we were totally right last year about what was going to happen. And this is just a chance to pat myself on the back. When I stood in front of you a year ago, we said U.S. economic exceptionalism, that it would outperform other advanced economies, and those markets were the places to be. If I'm wrong, I'm not going to tout it when I get up here next year, I promise. But you always take the chance to pat yourself on the back. And what we saw was extremely strong performance from the U.S. markets. S&P 500 up 25%. Second year in a row, more than 20%. That hasn't happened since the late 1990s. Like, oh, wasn't that a tech bubble? Yeah, I'll get to that. And it outperformed emerging markets and other international developed markets. The U.S. small cap index up almost 12% also. So like the U.S. was the place to be. And of course, we had that incredible performance by the so-called Magnificent Seven. Also a little bit of a question mark as we go forward. And we still think that the U.S. economy is exceptional, but we are noting some changes for this year and also the possibility of some chutes, also some ladders. Our economic outlook is for a little bit of a slowdown this year, 1.8% GDP growth across the economy. Now, that comes on the heels, and I think of regular or normal U.S. growth or the potential long-run GDP growth is around 2%, most people do. We have exceeded that every year since the pandemic. You've got the big downdraft during the pandemic and then the snapback, and we've had between 2.5% and 3% growth each year since. So exceeding, if you will, what we think of as the long-term normal. And in fact, I was wrong a year ago. I sort of underestimated. Even though we had U.S. economic exceptionalism, we had the U.S. economy outperform the number that we had projected last year. It was a welcome surprise when I was looking through the economic forecast, and it looks like a lot of businesses in the Syracuse area ended up having their business sales more than they had expected last year. So very much in sync with that. We are expecting a bit of a slowdown, but still a healthy growth rate. And we think that that is because of some of the slowdown in job growth. Job growth is slowing down to more normal levels. You see a little bit of the labor challenges and the ability to find labor, but also waning labor demand by firms. Not collapsing or anything, but it has slowed down, and that slows. We also have slower wage growth, and that's just going to lead to, we think, a slowdown in consumer spending. Capital expenditures, the other large part of economic growth, we also expect that to slow down, but that's one of the spots that could get a ladder, if you will. And the labor market is going to be key to how the U.S. economy performs and how the Federal Reserve approaches interest rate cuts this year. So over the past month, we've seen a dramatic change in the expectations for what the Fed is going to do. They had a meeting on December the 18th. They came out and said, we're changing our forecast. They release forecasts at every other one of their meetings so 4 times a year. On December 18th, they said, last time we said we thought we were going to reduce interest rates by 100 basis points in 2025, so 4 cuts of 25 basis points each. And then on December 18th, they changed that, maybe only 2, getting a little bit nervous about the inflation. The other thing is that they have noted strong labor force growth, and of course their mandate is about inflation and about labor force. We're expecting, this is the unemployment rate for the U.S. economy, we are expecting the unemployment rate to rise. We still have people joining the labor force, not as quickly as we did in 2023 and 2024, but they're joining the labor force in a context where there is not as many jobs available as there had been over the last couple of years. We don't have near the labor market tightness that we had in 2022. So we expect the unemployment rate to rise. Here it's at 4.1% right now. The Fed and we think of the equilibrium, the long run equilibrium, as 4.2%. The Fed and Bloomberg consensus, or the industry consensus, is for the unemployment rate not to change at all, basically, over the course of this year, next year, maybe up 0.1%. We expect it to rise. And that's going to be important when we talk about the Federal Reserve. Again, I'm not talking about job declines or a recessionary level of the unemployment rate, but it becomes important when we think about interest rates. Inflation is critical. As I said, the Fed is starting to get a little bit more nervous about the path for inflation. We've had a couple of reports, 2 or 3, that have surprised a little bit to the upside. And that's one of the things that put them on their heels a little bit on December the 18th and had them change their forecasts and had market expectations change too. We don't view inflation as a problem. We've got it down. This is the PCE measure of inflation. There are 2 major measures of inflation. This is right around 2.5%. If you take out the food and energy for core PCE, it's a little bit higher. And we'll get a report on this next Friday. But we don't really see the inflationary pressures that have the Fed spooked, if you will. And if that continues to come down, then we really should see the Fed move back to the position that they had before December the 18th. In fact, just last week, an incredibly strong week in markets came out when the other inflation indicator was released on last Wednesday morning at 8:30 in the morning, and started already to change the view of markets and of even the Fed. There was a Fed governor, Chris Waller, who did an interview on CNBC and said, oh, you know what, maybe we're a little bit too cautious on December the 18th, and the data keeps coming in this way, we're going to cut a little bit more. But fundamentally, what we see going on in the economy, and I talked about this last year, is even though we have a strong economy, it's not driving inflation, and that's because companies are getting more productive, being able to do more with less. And that is the reason that even though we've had that strong growth from 2 slides ago, the inflation rate has come down so much since that awful experience in 2022. So we are expecting, there's lines there a little bit hard to see, but the dots connect the lines and show both the Fed's forecast for their short-term interest rate. You can see where they hiked over the course of 2022, went up to a peak, and now they've started to cut. And their projections are to be cutting 50 basis points this year and then slowly. They're not even think that they're going to reach their so-called neutral level, about 2.5% to 3%, until you get past 2027. We think it'll be within 2026, after 100 basis points this year, and then the rest of the cuts next year. And that is a material difference. And as I said, I think that these dots will move down, if you will, as we start to get more and more inflation data and the Fed starts to get a little bit more comfortable. Now, on to the game and the chutes and the ladders. What is going to happen? We don't know, because we don't know how those policies are going to turn out. But we did identify what we think of as some of the most likely candidates for both the ladders and the chutes and the investment implications. With the ladders, especially for the economy, we think that one of the most likely ladders is capital expenditures, policy-driven. So there is probably too much focus in the campaign, as sort of like after the election and the victory, of extending the personal income tax cuts as a boost to the economy. That's just going to extend what we already have, right? Nobody's paycheck really changes. You just stop it from going down. And frankly, I had baked in that either candidate was going to extend those tax cuts for anybody making less than $400,000. And of course, President Trump wants to extend them for everybody. So it wasn't really a change to the baseline forecast. But a change to capital expenditure taxation would be different. So probably everybody in this room remembers that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 included the provision for 100% the full expensing of capital expenditures. And that is not still in place. That is tapering down. It tapered down to 80% last year and then 60%, and it is meant to keep tapering off. Well, candidate Trump, and now President Trump has reiterated it now in office, and the Republican Party platform from the convention and last year said that they wanted to reinstitute that full expensing of capital expenditures. That is a material difference compared to what's going on now, and we think could drive more capital expenditures and be a boost to the economy if it goes through. So there's one of the first ladders. There's also the possibility of a boost from fiscal spending. Now, some people will look at me a little bit askew or think that, didn't the president and Republican Party say that they're going to cut spending? Yes, maybe over the longer term, looking at things like getting control of entitlement programs and whatnot. We've seen the announcements about Doge, Elon Musk, they want to cut $2 trillion from federal spending. That's not going to happen. But the ladder that we could be seeing in 2025 is an increase, I think, in fiscal spending, especially for defense, which was touted during the campaign and by the Republican Party. And it would actually be very consistent with what happened after the 2016 election. They had campaigned on cutting spending and ended up with the 2017 budget, and so the dollars hit in 2018 with the biggest increase in federal government spending that we had had in 10 years. Now, this gets me in trouble. Sometimes it's like, well, aren't you calling them hypocrites or something like that? No, I'm making an observation about history that they had campaigned on one thing in 2016 and ended up doing a different thing. And just in case half of the room is mad at me, it was bipartisan. We had had 8 years of the budget sequestration from 2010, Tea Party Republicans, is this ringing a bell? And there was very low federal spending growth from 2010 to 2018. So the two parties got together and passed the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. Democrats got spending on social programs that they were interested in, and Republicans got increased spending on defense. And I also don't think, I think that they could do something like that and not be intellectually inconsistent with what they campaigned on. We still have a long-term spending problem, entitlement programs and the like, and those things could still be brought under control and still have a fiscal spending boost this year. And I think that that's one of the economic ladders that we could see. The last one here, and I probably should list it first because I've already mentioned it, and I think it's the most important, is productivity growth. We already have strong productivity growth, and if you go to our website and get the full report, you will see how productivity growth has surged after the pandemic. Tons of investment in getting more efficient. I think that the top response in your survey, in your forecast, was an expectation of increased technological capacity and that type of increase in productivity, and we expect that to continue. So it's already going on right now. And this is the silver bullet, if you will, for an economy, because it increases GDP, it increases wages, it increases profit margins, and productivity is really the source of long-term economic growth. And we've had so much investment and so much innovation from firms over the past several years, and we think that artificial intelligence will play a big role in continued growth, much like it did in the very strong productivity growth from the late 1990s up till about 2004, 2005. And we think we'll be riding that. Now, the chutes for the economy. What are the possible things that could bring us down a few steps? The first, deficits, interest rates to constrain long-term growth. These are an issue. We've got high deficits during an expanding economy. And as we analyze the various policies that were put forth by the Trump administration, the candidate, it's not going to solve debt and deficit problems. There are about 4 or 5 think tanks that do full analysis of the full panoply of sort of both candidates and saying, oh, what would be the impact? And you can pick any 4 or 5 of those. We happen to use the Tax Foundation in DC, and for good reason. If you're not familiar with the Tax Foundation, they hate taxes. They absolutely hate them. They want to get rid of them. And they think that they are a real inhibitor for growth. And sort of the biggest difference that you can get between any of the 4 or 5 groups that do those analysis of policies is how much boost do you assume that the economy gets from cutting taxes? The Tax Foundation is the most favorable for that. So the most likely, if you will, to give economic growth a juice, a boost from cutting taxes. And even their analysis, when they bring in all of the tax cuts that were proposed by candidate Trump, and then bring in tariffs as a revenue raiser and stopping some of the IRA funding, still have, after some economic impacts, a $2.5 trillion increase to the deficit over 10 years. And this is going to be a challenging thing to push through because if it does go through and you start to drive debt and deficits higher, that's going to drive long-term interest rates higher. And we know how that can be an inhibitor for growth. It can also be an inhibitor for markets. So we're going to have to see how the administration reacts if they're pushing through these policies and they start to see that movement in the 10-year yield and in interest rates. We're also going to have to see if they can push those things through Congress. They have a 5-seat advantage in the House, slimmest for a ruling majority coming in since 1988, I think. In 2017, when they passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they had a 47-seat advantage in the House. It's a lot easier to push these things through. So again, the budget and the possible impact from interest rates are a shoot, but we don't even really know if that's going to end up going through. The other possible shoot that I'd like to talk about is tariffs. Obviously a big focus right now. This is the effective tariff rate going back to the late 1800s. And if our analysis is that if the president were able to successfully push through what he campaigned on, 60% tariff increase on everything from China, 20% from everywhere else, that the effective tariff rate, which is just total tariffs collected divided by the imports, move up to 19%, highest since 1933, an incredibly protectionist time. To put this in scale, the tariffs that were put in place by the first Trump administration and kept in place by the Biden administration is actually visible on this chart down to the bottom right. Remember all of the disruption and all of the volatility in markets and all of the hand-wringing and all of the news articles about the tariffs on steel and aluminum and laundry machines and then on to the 3 rounds of tariffs on China in 2018. That pushed the effective tariff rate from 1.5 to 3%. And that was disruptive. If you go to 19%, I guarantee you, disruptive. Very disruptive for supply chains, very challenging, and especially challenging for markets. I'm not making a political call here. My job is to watch out for what will happen in the economy and try to project and handle our clients' assets accordingly. And this would be incredibly disruptive. Now, I don't think that these are going to go through. We know that President Trump likes to use the the leverage of this and can actually get very good outcomes. One of our ladders that we expect in a investment sense is using tariffs as leverage to renegotiate trade deals. I don't think that the president gets nearly enough credit for the renegotiation of NAFTA, NAFTA 2.0 or the USMC. NAFTA 2.0 is so much easier, but it's the USMCA, because that was a real boon. It was a badly needed revamp of our trade deal with Canada and Mexico, and use tariffs as leverage to get there. So our tariffs a chute or are they a ladder? If they go through at this level, it's going to be a problem. If they're used to improve our trade relations, it's a ladder. This would be a chute. And we just don't know which direction those things are going to go. The possibility of driving the interest rates higher is going to be very much on the mind. So I've already mentioned this, but the interest costs that we are spending, so this is just the net interest of nearly $1 trillion a year that we are paying right now. It's larger than the defense budget. This is just the interest rate costs, are projected to keep rising up to $1.5 trillion over the long-term forecast period by the Congressional Budget Office. And that is if the 10-year yield is roughly 4.1%. We're already above that. And if you think that it was going to be 100 basis points higher, then you can add $2.9 trillion to the bill over the course of 10 years. And this is the kind of thing that is going to end up affecting and changing, I think, the policies that get pushed through and determine whether we land on chutes or on ladders. I think probably the most important thing as we bring everything together, and for us, is what are the investment opportunities for our clients? Because last year was much more straightforward. U.S. was going to outperform, we want to overweight the U.S. and underweight everywhere else. This is much more challenging to say, we don't know which way things are going to go. But we do have some views about the way that markets are going to behave, at least under the baseline forecast and under some of the chutes and the ladders. The broadening of leadership. So we've had the Magnificent Seven really drive markets over the past couple of years. We thought that there would be broadening leadership last year, and there was for the last about 4 months of last year, and we think that that will continue. The dynamics of inflation and bringing down the interest rates at the short end and the 10-year not really moving down as much would be beneficial for banks as an investment opportunity. And we also think that the cyclical nature of where we are would help materials, and we also have a positive view of healthcare. The slowdown in consumer spending that I described, and consumers getting a little bit more discerning, has positive impacts for internet retail, warehouse stores, and home improvement, we think. And then also that next leg, if you will, of artificial intelligence, or somebody on my team paid more attention in geology than I did, and brought in the term stratification of AI, sort of that layering and moving into different areas of the economy. Because we've had the impact hit NVIDIA and sort of the chip making, and you see those advantages. But one of the main things that we're looking at is who is using AI, who's using it to get more productive, because that is going to end up driving profit margins, as I said. And then the last bit is, of course, we are expecting some policy volatility, and we think that there will be some opportunities there. So, in a nutshell, we still have a pretty positive view of the economy. We're expecting that slowdown. But much like last year, we would be happily surprised if it moves to the upside above what we expect. And we're dealing with some of the same issues and recognizing some of the issues that are here in central New York. We've got labor issues, sort of the availability of labor and hiring, but we think that both the U.S. economy and central New York will be able to power through those things. Thank you very much.